Hey friends, tonight we're drifting around the edges. Not of sleep, though maybe that too, but of countries. The lines humans draw on maps that rivers, forests, and mountains couldn't care less about. These lines dictate everything: the language you speak, which side of the road you drive on, which coins jingle in your pocket for your morning coffee. Yet so many were born from old wars, forgotten treaties, or just really bad surveying. If you're listening to this as you drift off, leave a little note in the comments. Tell me about the closest border to where you're listening from tonight, or the strangest one you've ever crossed. No passport needed here. Take a deep breath, let your mind wander. We're not crossing time zones or oceans, just ideas. And tonight, we'll stroll, sleepily, through some of the strangest borders on Earth. Close your eyes for a beat. Feel yourself settling in, because tonight we're going on a journey without moving, gliding past invisible lines drawn in ink and belief. Let's begin where the borders are barely there, so small you could miss them in a blink or a nap. Let's start small, tiny, almost invisible. Vatican City, the world's tiniest country by land and the shortest international border. An island of religion wrapped entirely by Rome. 3 kilometers of walls and gates guarded by Swiss guards in bright Renaissance uniforms. They look like a marching band wandered into a Caravaggio painting. But they're very real, very serious, and also very armed. One step you're in Italy, the next you're under the Pope's tiny sovereign flag. No passport booth, no customs line, just a subtle shift in the air. Imagine living next door and wandering into a different country just to borrow sugar or get your morning coffee. The Swiss guards have been protecting the Vatican since 1506. Their colorful uniforms, yellow, blue, and red stripes, weren't designed by Michelangelo, as some believe, though that rumor won't die. It's the Vatican, so rumors age well there. Young Swiss men, carrying halberds and glocks, posted at the gateway between sacred and surreal. They must be unmarried Catholic men between the ages of 19 and 30, at least 5'8", and have completed Swiss military service. They swear their oath in German each May 6th, honoring the 147 Swiss guards who died defending Pope Clement VII in 1527. The ceremony takes place in a quiet courtyard, proud families watching their sons pledge to protect a country that you could walk across before breakfast. The Vatican has its own postal system, its own railway, the shortest national railway in the world, just 300 meters long, and even its own telephone system. It prints its own euros. Well, technically, Italy prints them, but still. Half of the country is gardens. You could get lost in a hedge maze and end up at the heart of Catholic power. But not all tiny borders feel so curated. If we drift across continents to the icy grip of the Arctic, across the world in the Bering Strait, 2 specks of land stare at each other through Arctic fog. Big Diomede and Little Diomede. Russia owns one, the U.S. owns the other. And they're just 2.4 miles apart, but separated by the international date line. So stand on one island and you can literally see tomorrow, or yesterday, depending on your direction and your caffeine level. For the Inupiat people, this wasn't a border. They'd lived on both islands for generations. They hunted, visited family. Nobody told them they were crossing nations. The lines came later, drawn by people who never scraped ice off their eyelashes. During the Cold War, that line became the Ice Curtain. Big Diomede was militarized, its native people evacuated. Little Diomede became one of America's most remote outposts, a tiny village clinging to the cliffs. In winter, when the sea freezes solid, it becomes a time machine. You can literally walk from today into tomorrow, or from America into Russia. The ice doesn't care, it just connects. Local pilots still joke about flying passengers into the future depending on wind direction. Back in warmer waters, there's Monaco, nestled between France and the Mediterranean. Less than a square mile, but packed with casinos, yachts, and some of the most expensive real estate in the world. The border runs just behind Monte Carlo's famous casino. Lose your fortune at the blackjack table, stumble 50 meters, and just like that, you're in France. Same money, different tax man. Monaco is so small, its Formula One Grand Prix literally spills into France. Drivers race through multiple countries in one lap, though they probably don't notice while hugging hairpins at 200 kilometers per hour. No personal income tax makes Monaco a magnet for the ultra-wealthy. But if you want residency, you'll need to deposit €500,000 into a local bank and prove you can support yourself without working. Even the studio apartments are multi-million euro trophies. And parking spots? Oh, more expensive than houses in most countries. Up on a mountain in Italy, San Marino quietly continues its 1700-year experiment in stubborn independence. Founded in 301 AD by a Christian stonemason fleeing persecution, it was meant to be a sanctuary, a place apart, and it still is. Legend says Saint Marinus fled the Roman emperor's wrath. He climbed Mount Titano and declared his own micro-republic. Remarkably, everyone just sort of let him do it. It's lasted centuries by being too small to threaten anyone and just useful enough to tolerate. During World War II, San Marino took in over 100,000 refugees, 3 times its normal population. The whole country turned into a hiding place, a secret kept in the open. Today, it mints its own euros, issues coveted stamps, and has more vehicles than citizens. Its medieval streets, well, they weren't made for cars, which makes traffic jams feel like performance art. Imagine being honked at by a German tourist while an Italian scooter just zips on past, all inside a country the size of a theme park. Even smaller, Nauru sits in the Pacific like a lost button. Just 8 square miles, no capital city. The government buildings are scattered. Once it was one of the richest countries per capita, thanks to a mountain of phosphate built up from centuries of bird droppings. Yes, actual droppings. The birds made it rich. The mining made it hollow. When the phosphate ran out, the country nearly collapsed. Today, the island's center is a pitted moonscape, and life hugs the narrow coast. Its airport runway slices across the island like a scar. When planes land, they essentially fly over the whole country. And the one road, a loop around the island, means you can circumnavigate a nation in about under 30 minutes. Borders that are barely there, yet they matter. They divide minutes and centuries, ideas and lives, a line and a world apart. Now let's pull at the borders that tangle, places where a few feet can change your country, your taxes, maybe even your side of the bed. First, let's visit places where borders make puzzles out of houses and streets. Picture a cobblestone street under warm lamplight. Somewhere a cafe spills onto the sidewalk. Half the tables in Belgium, half in the Netherlands. In Bar-le-Hertog and Bar-le-Nassau, Belgium and the Netherlands share a border that's so tangled it runs through shops, cafes, even bedrooms. A kitchen in one country, a bedroom in another. Some houses have 2 front doors, 2 mailboxes, 2 governments. They paint little metal crosses on the ground so you know which country you're dining in, or where your dog's favorite fire hydrant technically belongs. The confusion started during medieval times. Local lords traded land like chess pieces. Over the centuries, those deals fossilized into a cartographic headache. Today, there are 22 Belgian enclaves inside the Netherlands and 8 Dutch enclaves inside those. It's borders all the way down. One restaurant famously has its kitchen in Belgium, but its dining room in the Netherlands. The waiters cross international lines to bring you lunch. During the COVID-19 lockdowns, this got particularly strange. The kitchen could legally operate, but the dining room couldn't. Meals were ready, but no one could eat them. Emergency services, sports broadcasts, even trash pickup all depend on knowing exactly which side of the line you're on. Some bars hang 2 TVs, one for each national team. And in one house, the border runs through the marital bed. The couple jokes they sleep in different countries, depending on which side they roll to. They file taxes separately, but share everything else. Then there's Yvia, a stubborn dot of Spain marooned inside France. A centuries-old treaty forgot to include it when transferring villages. But Yvia wasn't a village, it was a town, so it stayed Spanish. To visit, you cross France and end up in Spain again. Locals speak Catalan, drive Spanish cars on French roads, and share water pipes and electrical grids with their French neighbors. Their hospital serves both sides, their pharmacy, one of the oldest in Europe. At times, residents smuggled aspirin across the line when laws disagreed. A headache in Spain might have been illegal in France. Campione d'Italia is another little oddity, an Italian town surrounded entirely by Switzerland. The people spend Swiss francs, use Swiss phone numbers, and rely on Swiss buses, but they vote in Italian elections and cheer for the Azzurri. For years, the town's casino kept it afloat. Italians could gamble here legally, while the rest of Italy banned it. A pocket of legal roulette wrapped in lakeside peace. But in 2018, the casino shut down, and suddenly the town couldn't pay its bills. So Italy had to step in, and so did Switzerland. Campione became a study in microdependence, a reminder that no enclave survives alone. Then there's Busingen am Hochrhein, a German town entirely surrounded by Switzerland. Residents speak German, use Swiss currency, and attend Swiss schools, but their passports are German, and they vote in Berlin. They can choose whether to pay Swiss or German taxes. Some base their decision on which paperwork is easier. The fire department is Swiss, but the police are German. The buses are Swiss. The roads still German. And then there's Kaliningrad, Russia's island on the map, tucked between Poland and Lithuania. It's closer to Berlin than to Moscow. Once it was Königsberg, a proud German city. But after World War II, the Soviets took it, renamed it, and resettled it. Today, about 1 million Russians live there. To reach the rest of Russia by land, they need special transit permits through NATO countries. Not possible at the moment. And then there's Point Roberts, Washington, a tiny American town dangling below Vancouver. The 49th parallel drew the border, but the land didn't care. So the tip of the peninsula, technically American, is cut off by Canada. To buy groceries, residents must cross an international border. Children ride buses across 2 countries just to reach school. During COVID-19, when the border closed, Point Roberts became an accidental island, a town quarantined by geography. Listen now for the hush of water slipping over stone, a river redrawing the map while you sleep. The Rio Grande splits the U.S. and Mexico. But rivers, they're wanderers. They flood, they twist. One day you're in Mexico, the next Texas, and all you did was stay home. In 1864, the Rio Grande changed its mind near El Paso, carving out the Chamizal Strip. Lawyers argued for a century, and finally, in 1967, they froze the river in place, poured it in concrete, and made it behave. But rivers don't like to behave. The Rio Grande still swells and pulls at its borders. Floods nudge into neighborhoods that thought they were safely on one side. Rescue crews wade through murky water, sometimes in a different country than they started. Plants and animals don't care either. Birds nest in Mexico, fish feed in Texas. The river is a shared lung, breathing across borders. The Danube runs through 10 countries, but it never sits still. It splits, it shifts, shrinks. Medieval maps show it drifting like a sleepwalker. In dry years, new islands appear. In wet ones, they vanish. In Hungary and Slovakia, the Sigetkaz region is a tangle of channels. A farm might be Hungarian in spring and Slovak in summer. Then there's Argentina and Chile, divided by the Andes, sharp, ancient, and proud. But glaciers melt, valleys sag, water finds new paths. The southern Patagonian ice field is the source of one of the quietest border disputes on Earth. Ice flows east and west, crossing invisible lines. Mount Fitzroy towers in the mist. Climbers joke that they need to check which country they're in before celebrating the summit. And as glaciers retreat, new land is revealed, new cliffs, new watersheds, new reasons to redraw. In the Bidasoa River between France and Spain, there's a tiny island, Pheasant Island, 6 acres of green, and every 6 months it changes hands. From February to July, it's Spanish. From August to January, it's French. The flags actually swap. A quiet little ceremony, a diplomatic custody exchange. Long ago, kings met there. Treaties were signed, marriages arranged. Now it sits mostly empty, a speck traded back and forth, like a well-loved library book. Even within a single country, rivers get fussy. The Mississippi changed course over centuries, leaving oxbow scars and legal headaches. It has a slice of land only reachable through Tennessee. Missouri has a peninsula that's owned by Kentucky. Carter Lake, Iowa is wrapped entirely by Nebraska. The river wandered in 1877. The town stayed put, but now it shops in Omaha, sends kids to Nebraska schools, yet still votes in Iowa. The Columbia River between Oregon and Washington plays tricks as well. The official border runs alongside the Washington shore, meaning the whole river technically belongs to Oregon. So Washingtonians need Oregon fishing licenses to fish the water that's outside their window. Rivers don't read maps. They just keep flowing. And the paperwork tries to keep up. Imagine a horizon of sand under a blazing sun. No fences, no flags, just silence and shifting dunes. Sometimes borders leave behind a forgotten child, a scrap of land that's so unwanted it lingers in geopolitical limbo. Take Bir Tawil, a wedge of desert between Egypt and Sudan. Both countries insist that the other owns it. Neither wants it, so it just exists. 800 square miles of nothing. No government, no claim, no flag. The confusion comes from 2 old maps. Egypt uses the 1899 border. Sudan prefers the 1902 version. Each map puts Birtawil on the other side, a bureaucratic tug of war where the prize is non existence. And that's the point. Claiming Birtawil means giving up claim to the much larger and far more valuable Halaib Triangle along the Red Sea. That's land with towns, ports, and actual value. Bir Tawil, it's just sand, rocks, and the occasional confused camel. Still, a few dreamers have tried to claim it. In 2014, an American father named Jeremiah Heaton made a 14-hour desert trek from Egypt. He planted a blue flag and declared the Kingdom of North Sudan. Why? So his daughter could be a princess. International law wasn't impressed, though. But the story warmed hearts and flooded the internet with photos of a smiling girl in a crown. Heaton wasn't the first. There's also been a Bir Tawil Freedom Party and other self-proclaimed kingdoms. None are recognized, but all live on the curious corners of the web. Then there's Hans Island, a cold, craggy rock in the Arctic between Canada and Greenland. For years, Danish and Canadian patrols played a polite game of capture the flag. They'd land, remove the other's banner, plant their own, and then leave a bottle of schnapps or whiskey. The so-called Whiskey War lasted for decades, kind of a boozy standoff over an island that no one really needed. And finally, in 2022, they split the rock down the middle. Now Canada and Denmark share a land border on an uninhabited stone. The treaty was signed with full ceremony, and yes, toasts were made with schnapps and whiskey. A bit farther south along the Danube River lies Liberland, a would-be nation found by noticing a gap on the map. The river shifted, but the border didn't. Croatia doesn't claim the land, Serbia doesn't want it. So in 2015, a Czech libertarian named Vít Jedlička declared it his. He printed passports, even created a flag, opened applications for citizenship online. He envisioned a minimalist state run on cryptocurrency, voluntary taxes, and personal freedom. The land? 7 square kilometers of marshland. No roads, no power, no buildings. Croatian police have arrested Jedlička several times for trying to visit, but each time they let him go. No one really knows what to do with him or his idea. Thousands of hopeful citizens applied. Liberland has its own crypto coin, the Liberland Merit, but recognition, well, that's still just a dream. Before that came Rose Island, a man-made platform in the Adriatic Sea, built in 1968 by Italian engineer Giorgio Rosa. It had a bar, a restaurant, a souvenir shop. Rosa declared independence, printed stamps, and even asked the UN to recognize his new country. Italy was not amused. Suspecting a tax dodge, they sent in the Navy. Rose Island was destroyed after just 55 days. Today it remains rest on the seafloor, the ruins of a micronation with big ambition. In Scotland's Shetland Islands, a man named Stuart Hill declared his island Forvik, arguing that Shetland was never legally ceded to the UK. He printed license plates, issued currency, and refused to pay taxes. The British government mostly ignored him, but courts did not. He lost, and he lost often. But the dream of Forvik lingered, another sovereign state of one. And then in Western Australia, the Principality of Hutt River stood longer than most. In 1970, wheat farmer Leonard Castley declared independence after a dispute over grain quotas. He became Prince Leonard, issued Hutt River passports and stamps, and he welcomed thousands of curious tourists. For 50 years, Hutt River lived a farm turned fantasy complete with a royal family. It finally dissolved in 2020, but for decades it was the closest thing to a functioning micronation, complete with tax battles, titles, and a shrine to stubbornness. Some borders are drawn by war, some by rivers, and some just by someone who really, really wants to rule a postage stamp's worth of land. Somewhere in a forest clearing, a stone marker stands, 1 foot in Belgium, one in Germany, one in the Netherlands. And then there are places where someone simply says, I declare independence. The Principality of Sealand, a rusty old sea fort off England's coast. One family moved in, printed passports, minted coins, even wrote a national anthem. A sovereign nation on stilts, braving the sea. Sealand was built during World War II as a gun platform to shoot down German bombers. After the war, it was abandoned. And in 1967, a pirate radio operator named Paddy Roy Bates occupied it, and he declared independence. His family has been there ever since. The platform sits in international waters, smaller than a football field, but it has its own government, its own currency, and its own postage. The population rarely exceeds 4, but they have titles: Prince, Princess, Duke, and Duchess. Sealand has survived storms, fires, and even a military coup. In 1978, a group of German and Dutch businessmen took over the platform while Prince Roy was away. They held his son Michael hostage. Roy returned with a helicopter and armed supporters. The coup failed. A trial followed, possibly the only treason trial ever held on stilts. Germany sent a diplomat to negotiate, which awkwardly gave Sealand a flicker of unofficial recognition. They've since issued thousands of passports, minted coins, and even sold titles to raise funds. At one point, Sealand was for sale, with a price tag in the millions, possibly the only country you could buy with a wire transfer. Then there's neutral Morsnay, a sliver of land between Belgium and Germany, where no one could decide what flag to fly. So they didn't. It began with a zinc mine. In 1815, the Congress of Vienna couldn't agree whether it belonged to Prussia or the Netherlands. So they made it neutral. For over a century, it remained a country without a nation, or an army, or even a vote. Some locals dreamed of making it the first Esperanto-speaking nation, a made-up language for a made-up country. World War I ended the experiment. The Treaty of Versailles gave Morsnay to Belgium. The zinc mine closed, and the dream faded. But the story remains, carved into old coins and boundary stones. Some borders are mathematical. Others are more like a game of Twister. Stand at the Valserbuck Tri-Point, and you can put 1 foot in Belgium, one in Germany, and one in the Netherlands. There's a cafe nearby. They accept all 3 currencies, though they mostly take cards now. Tri-points dot the world. There are 176 spots where 3 countries meet, sometimes marked by stones, sometimes just imagined lines. At the 4 corners in the U.S., 4 states touch: Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico. Tourists contort to place hands and feet in all four at once. The real marker is slightly off, but close enough for a selfie. Some try points are dramatic. The one where Argentina, Brazil, and Paraguay meet requires a boat to reach. The one between China, Russia, and North Korea sits on a sacred mountain, guarded and rarely visited. Or consider the Korean DMZ, not strange for its shape, but for its silence. 4 kilometers of fortified emptiness divide North and South Korea. Yet cranes, deer, and even leopards roam freely where humans dare not tread. The DMZ, it's a paradox, the most dangerous border in the world, and one of the most peaceful for wildlife. Red-crowned cranes nest beside razor wire. Asiatic black bears roam through minefields. The absence of people has created a haven more vibrant than many national parks. And each evening, at the border between India and Pakistan, the gates close with synchronized fury. At Wagah, soldiers high kick, stomp, and glare in a dramatic ceremony witnessed by cheering crowds on both sides. It's nationalism as performance, a daily dance that ends with flags lowered and the gates locked. It's the world's most theatrical way to shut a door, but it's also oddly hopeful, a shared ritual, a safe release. Even enemies, it seems, can still put on a show. Picture a street that looks the same on either side, but cross it and history shifts under your feet. Some borders exist only in minds and on maps. They're invisible, but they change everything. The Mason-Dixon line wasn't originally about slavery. It was just a surveyor's line, drawn to settle a property dispute between Pennsylvania and Maryland. But over time, it became something else entirely. An invisible divide between North and South, freedom and bondage. Charles Mason and Jeremiah Dixon spent 4 years in the 1760s measuring and marking the line. They placed limestone markers every mile, crowned stones every 5, just doing their job. No idea they were sketching the outline of a nation's future identity. Their work was remarkable for the time, using stars to guide their path, delicate instruments to carve accuracy out of wild terrain. They crossed rivers, swamps, and political tensions alike, creating one of the most precise surveys of the 18th century. Today, the line still exists, not in law, but in culture. Drive across it, and the sweet-tea ratio shifts. Grits fade from breakfast menus. Accents soften or thicken, depending on your direction. The cultural divide lingers. Southern hospitality blooms below the line. Barbecue styles change. Tomato-based sauces turn to vinegar. Directions shift from go 3 blocks north to down yonder past the old gas station. During the Civil War, it became an unofficial front between Union and Confederate states. Now it's more metaphor than map line, but political scientists still use it to explain red and blue tendencies. Then there was the Iron Curtain, another invisible border stretching from the Baltic to the Black Sea. For 40 years, it divided Europe. You couldn't see it from space, but on the ground, it was everything. Berlin was its beating heart, a city sliced into 4 pieces after World War II. East Germany swallowed most of it, but West Berlin stood like an island. Capitalism behind the Iron Curtain. In 1961, East Germany built the Berlin Wall, overnight. Barbed wire by morning, concrete by nightfall. families separated, futures sealed. The wall became real, but the true border lived inside people's heads. When the wall fell in 1989, people danced on concrete. They chipped away at it with hammers. But long after the rubble cleared, the psychological divide remained. Berliners still talk about the wall and the head. East Berlin, with its wide boulevards and lingering nostalgia. West Berlin, dense with boutiques and bright ads. Even traffic lights and crosswalk signals hint at the city's split past. In Cyprus, an invisible line divides the island. The green line, drawn hastily in green ink on a map in 1963 by a British general, now slices through Nicosia, the world's last divided capital. Same island, same sun, but different flags. Patrolled by UN peacekeepers, the Green Line isn't a wall, but a buffer zone. Still, you need a passport to walk through parts of your own city. There are homes with ground floors in one country and upper floors in another. A hotel pool technically spans two nations. The general who drew it, Major General Peter Young, just trying to end a skirmish, but his green pencil birthed a half-century of frozen borders. Then, of course, there's the 38th parallel, dividing North and South Korea. Two young U.S. officers drew it in 1945, Dean Rusk and Charles Bonesteel, in a hurry in a Washington office. They had no background in Korean culture or geography. The 38th parallel was just convenient, already marked on their map, roughly halfway down the peninsula. That arbitrary choice has held for over 75 years. An invisible line that split a nation, a people, and a history. It became the world's most fortified border, the Korean DMZ. But it began as a pencil stroke on a piece of paper. Some borders are just etched in stone. Others, well, they're whispers, scribbles, and yet they shape destinies. Feel the crisp mountain air on your face. Somewhere up here, a ridge decides which way the rain will flow. Sometimes, borders follow the natural world so closely they seem to disappear into it. The continental divide in North America isn't a political border, but it might as well be. East of the line, water flows to the Atlantic. West of it, to the Pacific. It's the great dividing line of the continent, marked not by fences, but by watersheds. You can straddle the divide at Logan Pass in Glacier National Park. Step to the east, and your breath becomes part of the Gulf of Mexico. Step to the west, and it flows to the Pacific. The mountain doesn't care about your passport, but it does decide where your water ends up. The divide even shapes identity. Towns on the eastern slope look toward Denver and the Great Plains, where towns on the west side face Seattle and California. It's not just water that splits, it's weather, it's culture, and the way people see the world. Sometimes it's dramatic, a knife-edge ridge where rain flows in opposite directions. Other times it's quite subtle, just a wooden sign in a quiet forest clearing. It winds through native lands, tracing the same ridgelines long used as traditional borders by indigenous nations. The Pyrenees are a different kind of border, rugged, steep, and ancient. They separate France and Spain with stone and snow. But in the high valleys, languages like Basque, Catalan, and Aragonese echo between the peaks. Languages older than the nations they divide. The mountains don't speak French or Spanish. They whisper in the voices of those who've lived there for millennia. Shepherds cross the range without ceremony. Their sheep don't need visas. The grass is the same on both sides. During World War II, those same paths became escape routes. Resistance fighters and local guides smuggled Allied pilots and Jewish refugees across the Pyrenees, not as smugglers, but as stewards of secret freedom. The Basque people, in particular, never recognized the border. Their language is a linguistic mystery, unrelated to anything else in Europe. Their homeland straddles two countries, but answers to neither. Now look south, to the Sahara, a desert so vast it creates its own boundary. Not political, but cultural. It separates Arab North Africa from the black African South, a divide of language, religion, and terrain. But the border isn't fixed. It moves. It breathes. The desert creeps and retreats with the winds and the centuries. Caravans crossed this sea of sand for 1,000 years, trading salt, gold, and stories. Cities like Timbuktu rose as border towns, not where worlds ended, but where they met. In the Sahel, drought can shift the effective border hundreds of miles, borders drawn in sand, literally. Then there's the Strait of Gibraltar, just 8 miles wide, yet it separates two continents, two histories, two realities. On a clear day, Spain and Morocco wave at each other across the water. Same sun, same sea breeze. But cross it, and the world shifts. Laws, alphabets, expectations. For centuries, it was a gateway. Phoenicians, Romans, Moors, and Spaniards, they all used it. Today, it's a choke point for global shipping and a crossing of desperation. Each year, thousands attempt the journey in rafts and rubber boats, hoping that the narrow sea will carry them to safety or opportunity. Many sadly don't make it, a natural border with a very human cost. The Ural Mountains divide Europe from Asia, not tall by alpine standards, but ancient, worn into rolling giants. Still, they've split Russia for generations. To be beyond the Urals was to be in exile. Siberia, the edge of the known world. And now the Trans-Siberian Railway hums across with barely a pause, but travelers still mark the moment they pass from one continent into another. A simple obelisk, a photo, a quiet shift of identity. Further south, the Caucasus Mountains rise like a barricade between worlds, towering peaks over 18,000 feet. In those highlands, languages flourish that exist nowhere else. In Svaneti, a region of Georgia, medieval stone towers still watch over the valleys. Families once used them to guard against avalanches and raiders. Today, they guard memory. The Svan language is spoken only there, isolated by stone, time, and altitude. A reminder that nature may divide, but it also protects. In the folds of these mountains, cultures have survived the centuries. Sometimes the earth draws the lines, not with ink, but with rivers, deserts, and ridges. These are the borders we didn't invent, we just discovered them. Settle into a creaking train car. Outside your window, country after country rolls by like pages in a book. Some borders aren't fixed to the ground, they travel. Every ship carries its country's borders with it. A cruise ship is a floating piece of its flag state. Step aboard and you're under that country's laws. The ocean doesn't belong to anyone, but the ship does. This creates fascinating legal situations. A baby born on a ship in international waters might claim citizenship from the country where the ship is registered, the country where the parents are citizens, or even the country whose territorial waters the ship enters first. Maritime lawyers spend entire careers sorting out these floating jurisdictions. Cruise ships register in countries with favorable maritime laws, often small island nations like Panama or Liberia. This means a ship owned by an American company, carrying mostly American passengers, and operated by a multinational crew might technically be Panamanian territory for legal purposes. When crimes occur on board, determining which country's courts have jurisdiction can become a complex international puzzle. Embassies work the same way. The American embassy in Paris is American soil, surrounded by France. The flag flying outside isn't just decoration, it's a legal reality. Cross the threshold and you've entered America without leaving Europe. Embassy buildings exist in a strange legal limbo. They're sovereign territory of the country they represent, but they're also subject to the host country's laws for things like fire safety and building codes. This creates situations where embassy staff might be arrested the moment they step outside their front door for actions that they thought were perfectly legal inside. The most famous example, Julian Assange. He spent 7 years inside the Ecuadorian embassy in London, technically in Ecuador, avoiding British arrest warrants while never leaving a single building. His cat even had diplomatic status as a resident of the embassy. International airports have their own strange borders. The departure lounge is neither here nor there. You've left your country, but haven't really entered another. It's a liminal space, a nowhere land of duty-free shops and, of course, delayed flights. People can spend days in airport transit zones without technically entering any country. They're in legal limbo, citizens of Gate C7. Their only nationality is their boarding pass. The most extreme case? Mehran Karimi Nasseri, an Iranian refugee who lived in Charles de Gaulle Airport for 18 years. His refugee documents were stolen, leaving him unable to enter France or return to Iran. He slept on benches, showered in airport facilities, and survived on food brought by employees who took pity on him. His story inspired the movie The Terminal, though real life was far less romantic. Transit zones can become accidental prisons. During political upheavals, people have found themselves stranded in airports when their home countries collapse or revoke citizenship. The airport becomes a nation unto itself, with its own economy, social structure, and unwritten rules. Trains create moving borders too. The Orient Express carried European borders across the continent. Passengers would sleep in Austria and wake up in Hungary. The train was a time machine, a way to travel through countries without stopping. The original Orient Express began service in 1883, connecting Paris to Constantinople, now Istanbul. Passengers boarded in France and traveled through 6 countries without changing trains. The dining car served French cuisine. The sleeping cars were run by Belgian staff. The whole train ran on a dense web of international agreements. Border guards would board at frontiers, checking passports and customs while the train rolled through border stations. Travelers could sleep through it all, dreaming in one country and walking in another. The train became neutral ground, a mobile embassy, if you will, for diplomats, spies, and ordinary sleepers. The Eurostar Tunnel under the English Channel is a border that runs underground. You enter in London and emerge in Paris. Somewhere in the dark, the border passes beneath your feet. There's no ceremony, no checkpoint in the tunnel. The border is marked by darkness and the roar of the train. The Channel, required new international rules. British and French police jointly patrol it. Passengers clear immigration before boarding, so you're legally in France before you leave London. The tunnel itself is divided in half, with different legal systems applying to each side of the underwater line. Immigration law gets tricky underground. Asylum seekers are supposed to apply in the first safe country they reach. But how do you define that when you're under the sea? The tunnel even has holding facilities built beneath the channel, a kind of subterranean border station. Some borders drift, some ride rails or sail oceans, some sit in buildings or airports or tunnels. But they all prove the same thing. Borders are never just lines. Sometimes they follow us. Hear the soft scratch of a pen marking lines on a map. Borders born in filing cabinets, sealed with a signature. Some borders exist only on paper. They're legal fictions, bureaucratic boundaries that divide nothing but paperwork. Time zones are borders that carve up time itself. Cross from Eastern to Central Time and you gain an hour. Cross from today to tomorrow at the international date line and you gain a day. Time is the same everywhere, but borders make it different. The date line mostly follows the 180th meridian, but it zigzags to keep island nations aligned with their trading partners. Samoa and American Samoa are just 120 miles apart, but 24 hours in different time. Stand on one island and watch the sunset, then fly to the other and watch the same sunset again the next day. In 2011, Samoa skipped December 30th to realign with Australia and New Zealand. They went to bed on the 29th and woke up on the 31st. The first time in over a century that a country voluntarily erased a whole day. China spans 5 time zones, but uses only one, Beijing time. In western China, the sun rises at 10 a.m. Clocks obey the capital, not the sky. People live in 2 temporal realities, one official, one practical. Meetings might run on Beijing time, but breakfast might wait for sunrise. The Arctic Ocean has no fixed borders. The North Pole belongs to no one, but everyone claims it. Russia plants flags on the sea floor. Canada draws lines on the ice. The borders exist in filing cabinets again and on geological surveys. But as the ice melts, the Arctic becomes more valuable for shipping routes and oil. Countries file claims based on underwater ridges and continental shelves. The Lomonosov Ridge is now a hot topic for both geologists and diplomats alike. Underwater borders are strange, mapped by things like sonar and deep-sea probes, claimed with paperwork, ignored by fish. Antarctica is all borders and no country, divided into pie slices by treaty, but nobody can enforce a thing. The Antarctic Treaty froze claims in place. 7 nations claim parts. Others, like the US and Russia, claim the right to claim later. Stand at the South Pole and you're technically in every country at once. Or none. The penguins don't care. They cross borders by instinct. Research stations operate under national laws. American base, American rules. New Zealand base, Kiwi rules. Walk a few snowy steps, you change your legal system. Exclusive Economic Zones, EEZs as they're called. They extend 200 nautical miles from shore. That's how tiny islands can give nations massive ocean rights. France, thanks to overseas islands, has the world's second largest EEZ. Pitcairn Island, population 50, grants the UK control of over 800,000 square kilometers of ocean. Paper borders, invisible lines, marked by pens, not fences. But they shape time, law, and oceans, just as surely as walls or rivers. Sometimes the strongest borders are the ones you never see. In the modern world, some of the strangest borders exist in cyberspace, where geography means absolutely nothing, but boundaries mean everything. The internet was supposed to be borderless, but it's now one of the most bordered spaces on Earth. China's Great Firewall blocks access to thousands of websites. Citizens on one side can access Facebook and Google. Citizens on the other cannot. These digital borders shift constantly. A site that works in Germany might be blocked in Turkey. A video that streams in Canada might be unavailable in France. Your physical location determines your digital reality. The same internet contains different internets. Geo-blocking creates information bubbles. Netflix libraries vary by country. Music catalogs change. Even search engine results split depending on where you are. Digital borders are coded in and backed by law. They're invisible, but very real. Cryptocurrency introduced borderless finance. Bitcoin exists nowhere and everywhere. It answers to no nation. It travels faster than passports ever could. Some call themselves citizens of the blockchain, wallets instead of passports, consensus instead of constitutions. Virtual worlds like Second Life sell land for real money. People actually build digital homes, form digital governments. Some say they feel more loyalty to their virtual community than their country of birth. Online gaming creates temporary nations, guilds, factions, alliances. Politics play out over simulated terrain. Borders, they rise and fall with patches and updates. For players, these digital nations feel very real. Territory is fought over, rules are written, loyalty runs deep. In the 21st century, the lines we draw may not show up on maps, but they're still there. Borderless isn't always. Borders are changing faster now than ever before. Climate change is redrawing maps as sea levels rise and rivers shift. The Marshall Islands might disappear beneath the waves, creating refugees from a country that just no longer exists. Island nations are taking extraordinary steps. Tuvalu and Kiribati have purchased land in Fiji, preparing for the first voluntary national relocations in human history. Whole peoples may have to move and take their borders with them. Space is creating new frontiers. Private companies are filing for asteroid mining rights. Future Mars colonies will need new laws and borders and flags. The borders of tomorrow may be measured in light years, not miles. Even citizenship itself is evolving. Estonia now offers digital citizenship. No need to set foot in the country. Others may follow. You could soon belong to a nation that you've never physically visited. Meanwhile, algorithms shape digital life. AI decides which posts you'll see and which ads you get, which voices reach your ears. These algorithmic borders don't run through land, they run through your attention. They might shape daily life more than any political border ever could. Tomorrow's borders might be built in code, drawn on water, or etched among stars. The strangest border isn't between countries, it's between Earth and space. The Kármán line is the border between atmosphere and void. It's 100 kilometers above your head, the point where Earth ends and space begins. Cross it, and you're no longer earthbound. You're free of all terrestrial borders. Astronauts cross this border regularly. They leave Earth as Americans, Russians, Chinese, or Europeans, but in space, they're just humans. The International Space Station orbits above all borders, crossing dozens of countries every day without a passport. The Kármán line is named after Theodor von Kármán, a Hungarian-American aerospace engineer who calculated that above this altitude, the atmosphere becomes too thin to support aeronautical flight. It's an arbitrary line in some ways. Space doesn't begin suddenly at exactly 100 kilometers, but it's become the internationally accepted boundary between Earth and space. From space, Earth's borders are invisible. No lines on the ground, no walls or fences, just blue oceans, brown continents, and white clouds. The astronauts radio down to mission control, but they can't see the borders that separate Houston from Moscow, Baikonur from Cape Canaveral. At night, the borders become visible as light. The lights of cities, the glow of highways, the bright line of the Korean DMZ. Human activity makes the borders real, even from space. We write them in electricity and concrete, in movement and stillness. The most visible border from space is the one between North and South Korea. The DMZ appears as a dark line cutting across the Korean peninsula, a void in the lights that mark human habitation. It's the only political border clearly visible from orbit, marked not by what's there, but by what's missing. The moon has borders too, though no one lives there. The Apollo landing sites are American territory, according to some interpretations. Flags on the moon, claims in the void. Even in space, humans draw lines. But the flags planted on the moon have been bleached white by solar radiation, turning symbols of national achievement into blank surrenders to the cosmos. The borders of space, well, they're different. They're vast, empty, meaningless. The nearest star is 25 trillion miles away. The border between our solar system and the next is measured in light years. At that scale, Earth's borders disappear into insignificance. And that's the thing about borders. They feel so solid. Maps make them look permanent, clean, even sensible. But they're just lines, drawn in sand, snow, rivers, always changing, sometimes silly, sometimes serious. We've traced borders through deserts and under oceans. We've found them in the sky and in the deep earth. We've seen them divide families and unite strangers. We've watched them appear and disappear like morning mist. Some borders are ancient, worn smooth by centuries of crossing. Others are new, sharp with recent pain. Some are invisible, existing only in law and memory. Others are brutal, marked by walls and wire. But all borders are human creations. They exist because we agree they exist. They have power because we give them power. They divide us because we choose to be divided. The world is covered in them. Invisible fences, imaginary walls. They separate us, define us, even complicate where we place the toaster. But only when we're awake. When you sleep, you can cross them all. Dreams don't care about treaties. They don't recognize visas or passports. In dreams, you can walk from your bedroom to the Arctic, from your pillow to the moon. The borders that define your waking life dissolve in sleep. Tonight, drift from continent to continent in your mind. Cross rivers that roam, mountains that shift, and that gentle line between awake and asleep. Let your dreams carry you over every border, through every checkpoint, past every guard. Visit the places where borders make no sense, the enclaves and exclaves, the tri-points and time zones. Stand in 3 countries at once. Walk through houses that belong to 2 nations. Drink coffee that crosses borders between cup and saucer. Remember, the borders are just agreements, lines on maps, ideas made manifest. They're real enough to shape our world, but temporary enough to change with a signature, a treaty, a revolution. The strangest border of all is the one between consciousness and sleep. It's unmarked, unmapped, but we cross it every night. One moment you're here listening to these words, the next you're somewhere else entirely. No passport required for that journey. May your dreams be wide open, with no lines at all. I'll see you just across the next border.